going here. Yeah, it looks like we've got just about everybody, or pretty close. I see that we're may only be missing just a couple kids here, so we'll get going here. All right, let me present my screen here so you guys can see. Can you guys see that? I will take that as a yes. Anybody out there? Can anybody see that?
I can see it.
Thank you so much. All right. So since you guys are all logged into Schoology and have that access code, everybody should be good to go there. But this is U.S. History B. For the most part, a bulk of you have already taken U.S. History A, and from what you probably remember in U.S. History A, it is a thematic course. And what that means is, what that means is that we're not going to take just a chronological approach. And, typically with the second half of U.S. history, we would be, covering from the probably the 20th century on, something like that. But since we teach it in a thematic fashion, what that means is that we're going to be covering several themes over the course of the trimester here, okay? So if you think back to your U.S. History A, you probably remember that it was American Dream and American Experience. And then whatever your teacher thought fit under that is what you would be covering, is what you would be talking about. So in our second trimester in U.S. History B, what we're going to be talking about is the following. And I've kind of broken it up into weeks here to try to simplify what we're going to be covering and when. So you basically got 12 weeks to a trimester, and what we're going to be looking at. Now, this is essentially expansion and influence, and then we'll finish up kind of with the last third of the course, I would say, maybe a little bit more on the Industrial Revolution, the growth of industry, that type of stuff. Okay, so essentially, 2/3 or maybe even 3/4 of the course is how does the United States deal with the world? Okay. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background, and we'll have to deal with her for now. So you have probably seen this this template for what we're going to be covering and when we're going to be meeting. So since this class is an odd class, first or third hour, we'll be meeting on all of the green days. Okay. Now, we're not going to be meeting for an entire hour and 30 minutes. It's probably going to be much, much shorter than that. My classes yesterday never really went over a half hour. And as we go on, it might be a little bit more, a little bit less, but I want to be able to make myself available for questions and checking in and all of that stuff. As well as, try to give you the opportunity for just, I don't know, instruction, so to speak. So our odd class days, as I'm sure you've seen here, we're at 8:20 to 9:52. And here, this is what we're talking about today. So what's class going to look like? Those of you that had me last time around, that I like to make those grades, so to speak, or your quizzes and your performance pieces at 80% of your grade, weighted as 80% of your grade, whereas your daily work is going to be 20% of your grade. Okay. And you will see that in the grade book as we go along here. Attendance, administration wants us to be a little more proactive with attendance. So if you attend the Google Meet, I will count you as there for that particular day of that particular week. If you are, if you're absent or anything, it's not a huge deal. I will make the presentation available for you later, so you should be able to watch the video and see what it was that we worked on. essentially, I want to make it easier for you to just have to show up for the Google Meet and have it be less work than if you have to come back and do it later. But those of you that have had me in class before know that, hey, if you show up and you work while you're here, there shouldn't be a whole heck of a lot to do outside of class. In a moment, but not yet, we'll take a little Google Forms survey, which is essentially just some stuff that I'd like to know about you. You'll see that here in just a minute. That won't take you more than a couple minutes. We'll take a look to where to find the calendar. We will get into some new terms because you're already going to have a term quiz coming up on Thursday and Friday of this week. For you specifically, it will be on Friday. And then you will also have a little geography stuff that we're going to have to learn, and that is referred to as what I refer to as bigger chunks. So let's cover the bigger chunks part first, and then we'll figure out where stuff is located on Schoology. You can take the Google form, and then we'll come back with our last part, which is the foreign policy deal, okay? Here we go. So in that we're talking largely about foreign policy, and we're talking about how the United States or the continental United States kind of came to be over time here. This is what I want you to try to memorize before the end of the week here, okay? And some of this stuff should be pretty easy. I mean, obviously, you know, the original 13 colonies is on the East Coast. You probably have a good idea about that. You probably have a good idea of where Florida is. You probably at some turn, I don't know, somewhere in your educational experience learned that the Treaty of Paris was all the land acquired after the American Revolution. I'm sure you've heard of the Louisiana Purchase, purchased by Thomas Jefferson, 1803, doubling the land mass of the United States at that time. We'll go into further detail later here about the Texas annexation, this part in yellow here, 1845. The Mexican Cession, 1848, named after the Mexican-American War. This Gadsden Purchase down here in 1853 had largely to do with the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. We'll go over that when we cover it. The Oregon Treaty, so this part up here was typically, well, it was owned by the British, and, well, the United States just kind of moved squatters into there and just moved people in, and eventually the British just kind of said, all right, enough, fine, you can have it. And then lastly, the Red River Basin up here in 1818. Well, not lastly chronologically, but you know what I'm saying. So that's kind of your key as to what I want you to study before next week. You're going to see both this and this slide available for you on Schoology so you can kind of study. This is exactly what the quiz is going to look like for bigger chunks, so that you, so when you get this, this is the exact picture that I use in the quiz. So when you look at number one, I want you to be able to tell me that that's the 13 original colonies. When you get number two, I want you to be able to tell me that's Treaty of Paris. For number five, the Louisiana Purchase, and likewise for the rest of these, okay? It is a pretty easy way to kind of start the trimester out here. You should be able to score some pretty easy points on that, as well as the term quiz, okay? Let's go over to Schoology and see what that looks like. Okay, so you're going to see two folders available here. And the first thing that you'll see is the Trimester 2 Google presentation. So if you're ever gone or you're curious about what we're going to be doing in class or whatever it might be, just go ahead and click on this Trimester 2 Google presentation. That's a link right to this one that I was showing you before. And you should be able to see exactly what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. If you're curious about upcoming due dates, I'm going to be even more proactive this trimester than I was last trimester about making sure that those are all available for you on Schoology. So if you want to know when stuff is due, you look on Schoology. If you want to know exactly where your grade sits right now, go to Infinite Campus. Okay, so I hate to say this again ad nauseum, but if you want to know when stuff is due, look at Schoology. Look at this right-hand side of Schoology for upcoming stuff. If you want to know exactly where your grade is right now, check out Infinite Campus, okay? So other stuff you're going to need to know about, this is the first folder, the first unit that we're dealing with here at Foreign Policy. We'll get to that in a second. This one down here is your U.S. history textbook. This is basically every chapter in the book. See how it says the chapter second there? I got to fix this because it says unit here. I don't like that. I would rather just say chapter. But anyway, uh, when we do reading guides later, that's where you'll find that stuff. But for now, all that you need to know is this folder right here. Okay, so before the end of the week, before we meet again, it would behoove you to go on and check out this Quizlet link here. This is every term that is going to be on that quiz. So you're going to want to spend some class time today going on and studying up on those terms for that quiz. These are the exact slides that I was showing you off of that presentation before so that you can study up this geography portion. Okay, and then we'll get to this foreign policy spectrum here in a little bit. What I'd like you to do for right now is I would like you to go to this Getting to Know You survey. You are going to need to be logged into your school Google account for that to work though, okay? So make sure that you are doing that. Make sure that you are logged into your school Google account for that to work. So click on that link and get going on that, please, while I go kennel this dog. Okay, looks like you need just a couple more minutes on the survey. That's fine. The rest of you might want to check out the foreign policy spectrum. I'm going to be talking about that next. Okay, I am going to start talking about the foreign policy spectrum here. I'm assuming that everybody is done or close to done. And if not, this presentation will be available to you later, so you can go back and check out anything that you think you may have missed. Okay, so those of you that had me last trimester know that I like to refer back to the political spectrum. Okay, the political spectrum looked a little bit like this one in that it was linear. It's just one line. Okay, and that was where we were talking largely about politics. We were talking about radical, liberal, moderate, conservative, reactionary. So we take something that happened in public policy, or we take something that happened in government, and we went, what kind of opinion is this? Is it liberal? Is it conservative? Where does it fit? Well, we're going to be talking largely about foreign policy in the first part of this trimester, meaning how has the United States dealt with other nations? What kind of role have they taken on? Have they kind of pushed their weight around as a world bully? Have they, forced other countries to do things? Have we expanded? Have we gained new territory? That would be what we'd call imperialism, okay? Or on the other side of the spectrum, has the United States in different times been isolationist, closed door, hesitant to trade, not wanting to deal with other nations, not really allowing tourism, not really allowing people to go in or out. Okay, think of, if you go back to your world history, think of China basically throughout time. They've been pretty closed door when it comes to dealing with the rest of the world, saying that we're just going to be by ourselves. We haven't really wanted people going in or out, that type of thing. Okay, where we could be on the inside here, okay, in this green one, you see kind of collective security. This would be the idea that you're kind of working as a team or in an alliance or whatever that, or as a team effort in some type of capacity. That could be during a time of war when you, are a part of a supranational organization like NATO, or it could be the UN or something like that. Okay, where you're acting on behalf of a larger group. Okay, or internationalism, where you are being world policemen. Okay, this has been a role that the United States has taken on for a while here. If let's say that something were to happen in I don't know, the Sea of Japan or something like that. A plane goes down. If you were to turn on any news outlet, they would want to see what the president has to say about that. Well, why do we want to know what why should the president of the United States have an opinion about something that happened on the other side of the world that doesn't have anything to do with the United States? Well, perhaps because at that time, the United States has been considered Team America World Police, making sure that everybody in the world is behaving themselves. It used to be that if something like that were to happen, that people would go to the United Nations and say, how are we going to deal with this? Or how are we going to deal with somebody not treating their citizens nice? Or how are we going to deal with genocide or human rights violations? But if one country has kind of risen as this internationalism, like not necessarily spying, but watching other countries and making sure they're behaving themselves, then that would be this world policeman approach. Okay, imperialism is more so in that perhaps one is telling other countries what to do. Okay, or maybe we are expanding or conquering new parts of the world and adding that to be as a part of the United States. Okay, we refer to imperialism now because this is more of a word that we use in this time period. Back in the day, you all know that the United States started out as a colony of Great Britain. And that's one of the first things we're going to be studying. We're going to be studying the American Revolution early on. Why was it that the United States wanted to get out of that relationship? Well, they didn't feel like, as a part of the colonial empire, that they were truly on the same level as British citizens. They didn't feel like they were truly a part of that empire. And that was, as we'll study with our colonial history, the British Empire was one of the biggest in the world. There was the old saying that the sun never sets in the British Empire because they had a colony on every continent. Well, now we don't have colonialism because that kind of colonialism was more in your face and more obvious. And that doesn't really exist anymore. That kind of went away in the early 20th century, but we still have imperialism. And what imperialism is just influence in the world. Okay. So we'll get into that as we go along here. But hopefully that gives you an idea of this foreign policy spectrum and how we're going to use it as we go on. Okay. So one activity just to kind of get to know this foreign policy spectrum that you are going to do for me before we meet next week would be this. Okay. You are going to take that foreign policy spectrum, and you are going to pick 10 terms and create your own foreign policy spectrum. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment, but not yet. Okay. So here's what I did. Just in this example, I kind of defined the terms 1 through 10 for you so you can kind of see what I'm looking for. Okay. But I use the first 10 to kind of make a spectrum here to show you how all of those things could be laid across this spectrum based upon where I think the United States was behaving at that time. Okay, so you probably look at the Louisiana Purchase and go, imperialism. Why would Mr. Pieper put that there? Well, because we doubled the size of the United States at that time. Okay, and even though we did buy it, you could probably make an argument that you're moving a little farther this way in that it was purchased and not forced so much. But doubling the landmass of the United States is arguably, conquering new territory. And we'll talk about that when we get into the Manifest Destiny stuff. Now, Washington's farewell address, I think, is another one that Warren's talking about here, because in Washington's farewell address, he got up and basically said in his parting to the United States that they should not get involved in foreign affairs so much, that the United States should not get wrapped up in party politics and should just worry about oneself. And that was kind of an isolationist approach. Okay, so you can kind of see where I put that under isolationist. Now, this, okay, I made this PDF available under that link on Schoology as well. So what you can do is you can take this, you can dump it into Notability, and then you can pick 10 from this list. I put 100 terms on this list that you can pick. Okay? And you can kind of decide for yourself, doing your own research, hey, where does this fit on the spectrum? Now, what I do want you to do, whether you make this one slide or two or add notes to it or whatever, is I want to see where it's placed, and I want to know why you put it there. Okay, so either you're defining it for me and saying, hey, this is why it belongs under isolationism, or it was more, we were hostily annexing a place and that's why I put it on this side of the spectrum. Your call. Okay, and obviously there are no definite right or wrong answers here, because there are some that are kind of shades of gray, kind of hard to define, kind of hard to place. What would be a good example here? Let's see. The Chinese Exclusion Act, that would be a difficult one to place, because in one capacity, you're saying that we're being isolationist and cutting people off, but you could also argue that those are citizens of the United States that aren't being allowed in. So, you could argue that that's kind of acting as a bully, but I want you to think about it in terms of how we're dealing with other nations here, okay? So again, this is going to come down to you critically thinking about those 10 things, okay? These could be any 10 things that you see in the list, okay? Obviously, if you're simply going to take the 10 that I defined and place those on there, that's not going to receive a full credit for the assignment, I don't think. Okay, I would like you to come up with your own that you are genuinely interested in. And hey, if you have one that is more topical or is more recent, or it just isn't freaking on the list, go ahead and put it on there. That would be awesome. If you, I tried to span these out over all of American history. There are some that maybe the Iran nuclear deal you want to put on there. Maybe the Paris climate accords you would want to put on there. Okay, that would be that's the United States dealing with other nations. Okay, any instance in which the United States is dealing with other nations is one that you could use. Okay, so that is your assignment. Okay, you are going to take, you can see that foreign policy term quiz and the bigger chunks quiz is coming up next week. I put the due date for this on Tuesday because this class is going to be meeting on Tuesday of next week, right? So that will be the last day that you can submit that. Um, yeah, so you've got your list of things to do here. Okay, I would go onto this Quizlet link and I would study these terms because that's your term quiz coming up later in the week. I would go on and study this bigger chunks deal. Okay, and then I would complete the foreign policy spectrum, learning about 10 of those things that you did not know about before, placing it on the spectrum and explaining to me why it goes there. Okay, you don't have to give me a full Wikipedia definition, but I do want you to tell me a little bit about why you placed it where you did. Okay. I will stick around if you have any questions here. Fantastic job today, folks. Please, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes here if anybody has any questions about anything. Otherwise, make it a great day or don't. The choice is yours.